welcome back to Lap of the World. Today we're actually going to be attempting to recreate a car commercial stunt of all things, but I promise it's irrelevant, so bear with me. In the meantime though, before we get to that, I can announce that the first track that I'll be visiting this year will be the North Carolina Center for Automotive Research, or NCCAR for short. I'll be there on March the 30th. I've dropped a link to the Motorsports Reg sign-up page in the description below. That's driving with the Tidewater Sports Car Club. So I'm really looking forward to that. A little bit of a drive from here. How much of a drive will depend on if they have the landslides on I-40 in North Carolina cleaned up yet or not. But you know, fingers crossed for that. As you can tell, though, also as far as updates, the garage is progress is happening. The drywall is all up on top of the insulation that you saw last time. They've got some of the additional framing done. So really, it just needs the drywall finishing crew to get in here in this coming week, and I guess an electrician to stop back by and rehang the lights, and we'll be all set. So fingers crossed that goes to plan. I really am looking forward to getting moved back in so I can get ready to go to the track. I have Plan B for that if I need it, but I hate leaning on people, so if I can use my own facility, I will. But anyhow, so in the meantime, since we don't have a garage and we haven't gone to a track yet, we had to get kind of creative. So I decided to try my hand at the replicating the kind of now semi-famous commercial that Honda did for the new Civic Type R, which was the Virtual versus Reality Challenge. In their commercial, they had it was really slick. They had a mixed reality windshield overlay they put on one Civic, and that they had a professional racing driver at Real Life Road Atlanta, and then in a nearby laboratory or whatever, they had a professional sim racer in a Civic Type R that was getting a ghost feed, so to speak, from the real car on the real track. Now, I don't have that kind of money, but I have driven a number of tracks that are in video games. So as a result, there is an opportunity there that if I could find somewhere that had a simulation rig on which I could drive one of the tracks that I've been to several times and therefore have a decent benchmark, that it would be an interesting exercise to see how intuitive it is to sit down on a legitimate sim rig, which I am not a sim racer, for the record. I've definitely played Gran Turismo ad nauseum, and Forza probably an irresponsible amount as well. I built my son a simple sim rig on a budget, so it's got the little kind of like rubber banded steering wheel and stuff like that for the Xbox 360, but I haven't played with anything that has legitimate force feedback to any length. So to that end, I needed to find somebody who had a legitimate sim rig that I could go and pester. Which is why we've come to this undisclosed research location where, conveniently, my brother is working on some really pretty interesting projects. Come on over. That's also why we have, I don't remember what you said. You said that one's like 10 grand or something like that.
Yeah, this is the NVIDIA Drive PX2, sort of the brains of that NVIDIA's developed to drive your car for you. It takes inputs from about 8 cameras and then turns that magic-like into driving outputs like steering, brakes, gas, and the like.
Yeah. So that is the enemy, all you car enthusiasts. Anyway, sorry, digressing though slightly. So my brother is here, and he's actually involved with some really interesting research, kind of related to autonomous driving as well as other things. But let's talk about what you guys are actually using the sim rig we're going to play with today. How are you guys using that in your research, and to what end?
Well, this is the Complex Monitoring and Stability Laboratory, managed by Dr. Chakraborty here, and my buddy and I, David Harris, are working on this sim rig in order to try to comprehend what happens when we put autonomous vehicles like this guy on the same road as you or I that are driving, manual or even automatic standard vehicles that we have to drive.
Right.
So, and trying to understand better how that affects stuff like fuel economy or energy consumption, because right now there's a huge band of uncertainty as to how these autonomous vehicles, whether they're driving themselves around with no people in them, to here and there to pick you or I up, or whether they're driving with a lot of people in them. There's a vast unknown about how much energy that's going to consume.
Yeah, and this is kind of the interesting question or interesting thought that I've had about the autonomous vehicles, because a robot car makes a lot of sense in a lot of context. The biggest question mark I've always had, though, is what happens, and this is kind of what you guys are working on, is what happens when you throw the super logical robot driver in with a bunch of irrational humans on the road that we all are aware of, even ones that are completely rational. You can sometimes do unpredictable stuff, and that's kind of why you guys are...
Yeah, we've coined the term human in the loop. So normally when you develop a new vehicle, you've got a stage where you're all software. The whole vehicle is basically in a computer somewhere, and you're sort of trying to go through and say, okay, we'll simulate this. What happens? We can replace this engine with this big math model. Mm-hmm. We can replace the vehicle dynamics with models. And then you start gradually incorporating hardware. So you say, okay, what happens when we have a real engine on a dynamometer, and we plug that into this computer? And so we're taking that one step further and saying, okay, what happens when you have this car that's driving itself, and we plug, instead of plugging an engine in on a dyno, you plug a human in on a sim rig?
Yeah. So I've kind of come down here. I've been down here before a couple times, but I've kind of come down as like a, what you want to call it, subject matter expert on driving in a way, without them having to actually pay some, professional or drag some starving undergrads up from the basement or something like that to deal with this. So as far as what we're going to do today, then I thought I would try and do a mimic. There was a marketing piece done by, I think, Honda a little while ago, conveniently, where they did a virtual versus reality challenge. And we've kind of got one of those set up. Now, we've had to approximate in a couple of cases. I'll be driving a Lotus Evora instead of an NSX, and that's the closest we could get in the scope of the available simulations. And then we'll be driving it on VIR, though, Virginia International Raceway, which is a track that I am actually fairly familiar with. So this should be kind of a good test of, input accuracy and reflexes. So my hope is, I may be horrible at this, and this may just be a series of outtakes you see from this point. But
hopefully not.
But hopefully I can jump in and sort of get up to some kind of pace, and then I'll do see if I can recreate, not in real time because I don't have millions of dollars of advertising budget, but recreate sort of in delayed time a virtual versus reality challenge with myself at VIR.
Neat.
So we appreciate you having us down.
Yeah, no problem. It's always great to sort of show off what we're doing down here, as opposed to do a little bit of outreach. We're developing our own, I think you said, a variety of simulations. We are developing our own simulation in Unreal Engine 4. I'll go ahead and take this opportunity to plug Cosmos Lab. We've got a Twitch and a YouTube. I'll give him the information so it can be linked.
Links in the description.
And you guys can keep up with what we're doing here. We'll publish updates regularly to show you what's going on. But today we're going to be doing Assetto Corsa.
Yep. Yeah, that's what we got available. It's something simple, something we could get a track on, as opposed to the random city streets that you guys will be developing for more real world applications.
Right.
Just from a user input and experience standpoint, it was useful to just take something off the shelf. So
yeah.
That's what we're working with. Should be interesting, but we'll get over to me probably making a hash of a simulation rig. So
let's do it.
Okay, getting situated here. So.
Yeah.
All right. So what am I looking at here? You got, it's a Fanatec setup, obviously. But
yeah. So it's a Fanatec CSL Elite wheel system with the Club Sport V3 pedals. Watch your head coming down the front.
Awesome.
HTC Vive. That's the not the Vive Pro. That's the standard kit. And you're sitting on a Hyundai Elantra front passenger seat. We went fishing for.
Excellent. Now there's some provenance for you. Realistic, it's down to the core. Probably some coffee stains on here too.
Oh yeah, you know it.
Genuine.
And then the space frame it's all sitting on is 80/20. They call it the industrial erector set. It's pretty accurate. Everything just bolts together.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing fancy here.
Yep. Awesome. Cool. We'll get set up and I'll get driving. VIR, as I mentioned before, is a track that I actually learned in reality, as it hasn't been on any video games until very recently. And my best time at VIR was accomplished back in 2014 on a freshly repaved track just after the demise of the poor old oak tree, with a time of 2 minutes, 13 and a half seconds, which was good enough on the day for third place in the erstwhile TTB class. Now, as you can see, replicating that in the virtual world, it took a little bit of trial and error, but eventually we got there. Just a few notes as we start the lap. In the virtual world here, I'm driving a Lotus Evora S, which should theoretically have a little more poke down the straights than my stock motor NSX in reality. However, on the other end of things, if you pay attention, I am consistently outbraking myself with the real-world NSX versus the virtual world Lotus. And that's mainly on account of having the luxury of actual G-loads and pedal feedback with which to judge my rate of deceleration and brake pressure in the actual car versus on the sim rig. Now, I'll shut up at this point and let you finish watching the lap, and we'll see how close I actually got to my real-life time with, say, a dozen or so laps under my belt in the virtual world. That was interesting. I think I made myself sick there for almost.
We went backwards a few times.
Yeah.
How was it?
No, that happens. That is pretty impressive. I think now folks having watched the lap comparison there of what happened afterwards, we'll have some outtakes on how I got to that point here probably in a second. But it did involve some backwards and sideways through a couple of sections. I mean, it definitely is good. I think it trains you in a very plausibly brutal fashion, I guess, for driving habits. All those of you that are familiar with track driving, it's pretty widely established that you have to look as far ahead as you can. When you're playing a video game with a controller on a TV, you can't because there's only the screen in front of you. But in VR, you have to move your head or you make yourself sick because you end up with just stuff scrolling in front of you.
Yeah.
So, from that perspective, it's very accurate to reality. And I think, in fact, I could jump in, witnesses here, I've played with not this rig, but I've played this game in virtual reality one other time with a different rig. And we had like a couple of practice laps before we did this.
Right.
So, pretty intuitive to get in. I think the biggest challenge is not feeling the G-forces. It was difficult to tell how hard I was braking. I do love the Fanatec wheels and pedals. This is very tactile. Had a lot of good feedback. It was triggering some interesting reflexes. I know turn 4, I think, if my brain is correct there, turn 4 at VIR, real sharp left-hander. I was actually starting to reflexively adjust my hands on the wheel because in the NSX it's got a slower steering rack at low speeds, or a slower steering rack in general, so at low speeds I'll often have to slightly reposition in order to turn through in one motion. So I was kind of reflexively start doing that on a couple of times and had to stop myself and be like, no. But
it's an interesting point you bring up is actually the G-forces and feeling that sort of your butt dyno is something that we we thought about incorporating, but when you're developing one of these simulators, one of the key aspects you need to keep in mind is that sort of sickness factor. So a lot of people get ill, get motion sick just by sitting in these things, even without any base movement. They make modifications for these which allow the back end, so right here, to pivot this way. And actually then we'll slide the entire rig forward and back to simulate accelerations and decelerations. But you have to be very careful, because the more you try to make it complex, the more easily you can actually make the person driving it violently ill. So
yeah, your target audience might shrink there as far as your test subjects that could put up with it.
Yeah, significantly. So that's why we've stopped where we did. But
yeah, no, I do appreciate though with this particular which Fanatec pedals and wheels are these?
That's like Club Sports. So those are the pedals that are horizontally oriented. They make a set that hangs down, but these are the more budget-friendly option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's great, because I think they had one of the challenges we had with our sort of we built ourselves a little rig at home out of like 2x4s and stuff, and using an old budget wheel and pedal set for a 360. And the biggest complaint I had there is there's no weight to the controls. So if you were stepping on the pedal, you were having to just sort of modulate it with the angle of your ankle, right, as opposed to feeling the weight of it. Whereas this one, you could definitely tell. Like the first test lap I did, I just ran straight off the end of turn 1, because I was just sort of tapping the pedal like I would on that this sort of budget. I don't remember what that is. It's like a Thrustmasters
most of
$100 set. But
most of the pedals that you find in your standard commercial, like off the shelf wheel and pedal like driving sets, they're like a big rubber band. So it's essentially just an elastic band that's tied around this pedal. So when you push the pedal forward, the elastic band sort of pulls on it back to counteract the work of your foot, but all it does is return it to a neutral position. This one's got a big hydraulic sort of piston on it, so it really does put significant resistance on your foot. It really allows you to feel how much you're braking.
Yeah, that was impressive. I think probably a big thing as far as just simulating people's reactions, and triggering, being able, I think the best, what you guys are kind of hunting for here is being able to trigger irrational human reflexes, like me trying to reposition my hands on the wheel, stuff like that, is having the weight to the controls and it be, very familiar feeling. Right. And I think that has been entertainingly well accomplished between the different setups. I mean, and I think people will be probably pretty curious to go and see what kind of where the rest of this research leads, and understand that you were entirely to blame if they get run off the road by a robot later in their life or something like that.
Obviously, no, that's entirely true.
But anyway, well, no, it's been fun, but I think we're going to probably call it there before we get too much further down the rabbit hole. And so I appreciate you letting us come down on a rainy weekend and still do some driving out of the weather.
Yeah, anytime. This is something we're trying to get a little bit more outreach going on, get a little bit more interest in this as we proceed with our research. We're sort of trying to get people in here to do both pedestrian studies and driving studies. So as we move forward with that, we'll be posting updates on the Cosmos Lab website.
Awesome. So check them out, and we'll see you guys here in a... Oh, never mind.
Big jump cut here?
Yeah, big jump cut here. Right. So as I was unable to say at the time for whatever reason, please go check out Cosmos Lab and their research and blogs and stuff like that. I've left links to all their social and their website in the description below. And if you're at all curious how this whole human autonomous interaction is going to play out in the long term, it'd be a really good research outlet to watch. I'm certainly entertained with most of the prospect, even though you'll have to pry my car keys from my cold dead hands or whatever you want to call it. So anyhow, wrapping things up here. So a lot of fun doing the simulator rig. I hope you guys enjoyed that. It was at least entertaining for me. And first track event, March 30th, NC Car with Tidewater Sports Car Club. Again, I've left a link to the event registration page and the link in the description below. And before I somehow manage to stumble over some other set of words, I'm going to call it there. Again, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for stopping by. I'm Richard, this is Lap of the World, and I will see you in the next video, if not an NC car.